Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and we have very special guest today, Mr. Gunther Jahn, and I mean he is a good friend of mine in a way that we follow each other on Twitter since quite some time. I agree on few things that he says, and don't agree on many things that he says. So, as we both are lucky to live in a society which gives us right of freedom of speech, so we can discuss in a very polite manner on different things. So, I would start first of all. I thank you, Mr. Kunta, for giving us time, and
Thanks a
Mr.
lot.
Adit is Adit from India, and he is also joining the discussion because the main point that Mr. Khunter has touched is speaking about something about India, which we will discuss later on.
Ex-India.
Whatever, we will discuss it later on. But for the moment, I will start from the Gaza. As we know that the destruction of Gaza, Muslims think that it is because of Israel's aggression, but I personally think that it is Hamas who broke the peace agreement. There was a peace agreement, there was a ceasefire, and Gaza had all the freedom. It was not a prison that they call. And then Hamas all of a sudden attacked innocent civilians who were enjoying music and killed more than 1,000 Israelis. And then Israel had all the right to retaliate, or you can say that to secure its people for future aggression, to wipe out Hamas. Now, my question, Mr. Khunter, is that there is a ceasefire agreement now. New ceasefire agreement is sponsored by President Trump, but I don't agree that there will be a peace between Palestinians and Israelis until and unless Palestinians stop saying that we want to finish every Jew and we want to get rid of Israel. Because two state theory, Israel agreed in 48, in 67, in 73, but again and again Israel was stabbed in the back. So, how do you see this peace agreement, and what is the future of the region then?
Thanks a lot for the invitation. This is a very sensitive question, obviously. I think that we have a very fragile situation ahead of us. It would be nice if this peace agreement would be a peace agreement, but it's just the exchange of hostages ultimately, and it's not a real peace agreement at the moment. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Now it's good that the hostages are free, and also they had to be paid with because these were 20 innocent people who were going to a festival and they are now free. That's good. But over 2,000 terrorists, and they were all convicted terrorists. They were all murderers or terrorists, and they are now back in the hand of the Hamas. And so that was the price to pay. Fine for me, but nevertheless, the real freedom and the real peace in the Middle East can only come once both sides have really accepted that they will live forever together in the same area. And as long as this is not the case, I don't see any kind of peace around. I made my proposal. That's for NATO membership of Israel and for federalism of Israel. I know that also many Israelis don't want it because it combines then also full citizen rights for the Palestinians inside Israel, and it would be a balanced state between Arabs and Israelis. So that's also some sides don't want it, but to my knowledge, it's still the fairest proposal which there can be. And alternative is also the two-state solution, but unfortunately, there is no will on each side. It's just a fantasy which the West wants, and some Arab partners want it, but unfortunately, there is no will but in Israel and also no will on the Palestinians to really go on a goodwill solution of two states. So I'm for the federal Israel in the NATO.
Uh, Now, for example, your title, it says that you are for expansion of NATO, as you said that for Israel. What actually your organization wants, and how far you want to have the NATO extension?
NATO expansion or enlargement is basically on the wish of the countries. That means how far, of course, Ukraine, of course, Kosovo, of course, Bosnia, Austria, Malta. So basically all Europeans should be in NATO. Europe in that sense includes also the Caucasus countries. That means Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, similar as Turkey. And it's also potentially possible for Israel, and that would be as far as it goes. NATO has for outside European countries, it has the Global Partnership Program, which is for Colombia or Pakistan, Australia, this kind of countries. They are our global partners, basically allies like Japan, South Korea. And so these are the structures. So that's what I'm promoting. When it comes to me, myself, I'm actually an economist and I'm an activist for EU and NATO enlargement. And I've started a campaign for Austria. I'm an Austrian, and Austria is a neutral country since 1955 when the Soviet Union and the Allied have left. And now, similar like Sweden and Finland, I was then trying to create a big momentum after the Russian war against Ukraine to bring Austria in to NATO as well, which I unfortunately failed. So we are still neutral, and that's something I continuously campaign. My organization is not very big, let's call it like this. It's a advocacy committee, but I have now reached a big following on Twitter, and I have also extended my activity to basically campaign against all the enemies of Ukraine, in also to show them how painful the situation in Ukraine is. And as India and China are supporting Russia now, I have also extended my activities against India and China. And I call for tariffs on India, and I call for sanctions against China, and also for the dismantlement of these countries to share the pain of Ukraine.
Uh, as I remember that when the dismemberment of USSR, there was an agreement that NATO extension will not be to the countries bordering to uh, Russia. That was my understanding. And the war in Ukraine, Russia started because NATO wanted to give membership to Ukraine. And another thing is that there was a peace agreement which was supposed to go between Zelensky and Putin. But Boris Johnson went and he stopped that peace agreement. So, don't you think that the provocation was from Europe and America and not from Russia?
I have to disappoint you. I disagree now on all points you made. So we can have a good debate. You know, the thing is, when the Soviet Union broke, the Warsaw Pact countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, then Slovakia, these were all countries which were afraid that Russia might come back again. And so they were looking for security. And it was not America pushing them into NATO, because that is not how it works. And also, America is always very reluctant, as you see today. America is very reluctant to die for Eastern European countries. And that was a big debate before the First World War, Second World War, in the Cold War, and also in the 1990s and 2000s. So it's more these countries who do all their lobbying effort in order to be under the American protection, meaning in NATO. And the same is true for Ukraine as well. The Ukrainians wanted to be part of the West. You see, even today, America is against Ukraine in NATO. And it's simply a myth that we have wanted the enlargement. It is much more that these countries wanted the security because they know how it is to live under Russia. As we see today, what kind of brutality Russia is waging against Ukraine today. So it's the Ukrainians who want the security. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it was never a promise not to enlarge. There was never a promise. The only promise that there was, is that we will not be aggressive or something like this, And we wanted a peaceful cooperation with the former Soviet Union, with the ex-Soviet Union. And we have never attacked anybody in Eastern Europe on that one, and we will not. But these countries looked for security, and that's exactly what happened. And also in the case of Ukraine, all these myths that the West was plotting against Russia, it's absolutely not true. But it's the Ukrainians who wanted to live like the Polish people, like the Slovak people. Because what we actually have done parallel to NATO enlargement is enlarging our European Union to these countries. And there's significant opportunities, there's better prosperity, there's freedom in the European Union. And this was very attractive for the Ukrainians. They wanted the same level of prosperity as Poland or the Baltic countries. And that was basically what's happened. And that had led to the conflict because Russia always had for hundreds of years the resources and of the human resources and the mineral resources and the strategic location of Ukraine, and Putin didn't want to give it up. He always loved Ukraine. He wanted to have it from the start of his power in 99. He wanted to have it in 2004 at the first revolution. He took it again in 2010, and the people of Ukraine took it from him in 2014, and therefore he started the war.
Adit, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just, ignoring the domestic politics of Ukraine and how Ukraine became basically a proxy war between the United States and Russia. I wanted to understand from Gunther that today Austria is bordered by Czechoslovakia and Hungary, for example, right? And tomorrow, if the Soviets, sorry, not the Soviets, but the Russians in this case, if they decided that, we want to put in the S-400 missile systems in Czechoslovakia and Hungary and put in trade restrictions between Austria, which is a neutral country, as you mentioned, after the 1955 treaty, um, would that not sort of antagonize both NATO countries and Austria? Mr. Nehammer, for example, would he not be antagonized by such an act? Would it not be perceived as aggression from Russian state towards a non-NATO sort of country?
If you look at the geography of Europe, we are one a rather small continent, yeah, and we are all in a way united by geography and history and destiny, and by the European Union. And Austria is also a European Union country. We are a political union, and we are also bound to solidarity. That means we are going to defend each other. And if Russia attacks now Slovakia or Hungary, also the Austrians will have, in many ways, the obligation to defend these countries. But also those countries further to Russia, like Slovakia and Hungary, have the obligation to stop any Russian
Sorry,
aggression.
Gunther, I don't think you quite understood my question. Rather, my failure, I couldn't articulate it very well. I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, similar to, all the hypothetical situations that you talk about, ex-India, ex-China, ex-Russia kind of stuff.
We can
And the
discuss about ex-India.
sorry,
Ex-India is very real.
it's not. I can tell you
Let's discuss.
there are multiple. I mean, to my mind, it's the figment of imagination of a very unwired man to think of a concept called ex-India. India, it's someone who doesn't understand India, somebody who hasn't studied India would go on to make such propositions because destabilizing India will have multiple ripple effects across the globe. I mean, we are talking about mass immigration, mass religious, ethno-religious crisis. You talk about Yugoslavia so often. 100,000 people died between 1991 and 2000 in the Yugoslavian crisis. In 1947, when similar ruptures happened between India and Pakistan, we saw the displacement of 15 million people and almost about 1 million people were killed as a consequence. So you're basically either advocating for, mass genocide, mass movement of people, because you also have to remember that there is mass poverty in India and any ruptures in India will basically have a consequence on the NATO nations. So you will have mass immigration, running into all of these countries. Plus, you've got to remember that India is a nuclear state, so 160 nuclear warheads. Who gets control of all of that? The military power. Plus, in addition, NATO allies are running military, exercises with India at the moment. Trade with the United States is almost about 100 billion plus. Trade with Austria is almost about 3 billion. That gets impacted. Where do you, and how do you're actually going to be empowering China as a consequence. So you will be strengthening, Shanghai as a consequence of destabilizing India. So all of that effort that NATO countries have put in to counterbalance China, you will be essentially undoing all of that. So in my mind, it's a figment of imagination of a rather warped mind at the best. But coming back to my fundamental question with you, with regards to Austria's position, it's a hypothetical position where, say, for example, if Hungary and Czechoslovakia get over friendly with the Russians and the Russians place S-400 systems in Czechoslovakia or Hungary, and that sort of critically threatens, the sovereignty of Austria, the sort of the bipartisanness of Austria, would that not irk the NATO countries? The NATO countries being United Kingdom, United States, France, etc., etc.
Yeah, Adit, but Slovakia and Hungary are also NATO allies since
Like I said,
1999 or
hypothetical.
2004. So the truth is there will be no S-400 base there because that's a Russian military anti-aircraft military weapons, which never will be allowed in NATO countries. And also, so that's not a question to be put. Yeah, even when Mr. Orban is very much in the pocket of Mr. Putin personally, and he is offering to host a summit, he will never put such Russian military gear into Hungary or in Slovakia. So that's completely out
Well,
of
I see why you want to
the
deflect my
alliance
question. My
lines
question in
well
itself
ordered.
was a hypothetical question. It wasn't a literal question. It's a hypothetical scenario. And I can see why you want to deflect that question because it's an uncomfortable question which is being asked of you, which is what has happened to Russia. I mean, Russia was basically triggered by the expansion of NATO, a promise made in the 1990 and 1997,
That's not true.
repeated times.
That's a repeated lie of Russia, which you repeat on this podcast the second time. I have refuted it already, and it's not true. There is no promise of non-enlargement of NATO. It was never made, never by George W. Bush or George H. Bush, nor by Ronald Reagan, nor by any American leader ever. Not a foreign minister of America has made this promise to any Soviet leader, no anybody else. Yeah? And how
So,
could they? Because you cannot promise the security of Poland from the behalf of the United States for decades to come. How could he have said that? And nobody did, because basic truth is the West has won the Cold War. The Soviet Union has collapsed because of its internal failures. Yeah? And then the countries which were under the yoke of this kind of terrible regime, the Soviet Union, they have looked for freedom and security, prosperity, and we have integrated them upon their own request. And this was fair, and this is what sovereign nations can do. And if you say that Poland is not a sovereign nation, please, and that's the end of the debate. They can choose the alliance system. That's the nature of sovereignty. And please, my friend, Ukraine is a sovereign nation recognized by Russia several times, secured in different treaties, which we can all go from Budapest to the Black Sea Treaty. This was all agreed by Russia, the sovereignty, including Crimea. And so there is the right of the Ukrainians to choose their alliance. They can choose NATO. They have chosen NATO. It's in their constitution that they want to be part of NATO and EU, and we should accept them. And the reluctance of America to accept them is a shame, and we should integrate them. And then we wouldn't have had this war at all, because Russia would have never attacked NATO, because we are 20 times stronger and we have much more nukes. Our nukes work, and they have no chance against us.
So you're basically calling for a nuclear war. So you're okay with a nuclear war. You're okay with threatening a nuclear power and with the hope that you might be able to dismantle their nuclear resources and nuclear arsenal by antagonizing them. You do not believe in coexistence. I can see why you are warped in the head because you want to call for the dismantlement of China, Russia, India, while you want to empower states like Pakistan, for example. I mean, your whole fallacy, your whole, argument to empower Pakistan, included in the, various NATO and OECD alliances, etc., goes to show that you're okay with a proxy state of China, a China, by the way, that you want to dismantle. You want to divide China into various splinter groups, but you're okay to include Pakistan, which is basically a proxy state of the China at the end of the day, ignoring everything that China and the Pakistanis do together. Military alliances aside, most of the military tech that Pakistanis own today, barring the F-16s, everything is Chinese at the end of the day. So you're okay with accepting that sort of hegemony of the Pakistanis into your alliance. So there is a bit of issue in your theory, wouldn't you admit?
Yeah, I would also like to add here that as I'm from Pakistan, so Pakistan is a global hub of terrorism, and it has been proved time and again. The second thing is that there are some genuine independence movements of Balochistan and Sindh in Pakistan. There is no genuine movement of independence in India, but you call India ex-India. But you don't see any problem in Pakistan who created Taliban, because I read somewhere that you said that Taliban is a proxy of India, while it was proxy of Pakistan. And Pakistan had created, and when United States left Afghanistan, Pakistan was happy to bring in Taliban. President Trump, during his first term, said that we paid $33 billion to Pakistan to fight against Taliban, but they saved Taliban. So how come you are supporting Pakistan, which is a global hub of terrorism?
First of all, India has, during this last 3.5 years of the war of Russia against Ukraine, I have on many occasions called for India to join the free world. I have made many podcasts where I called for India to be a good country, to support Ukraine, to fight for the free world. I was very optimistic on India because I also fell for the Modi propaganda that India is a global democracy. It's the largest democracy in the world. Yeah. It wants to be a good country now. And, for 3.5 years, we Europeans and the Americans have tried to shift Mr. Modi outside of this Chinese, Russian kind of authoritarian axis. And the truth is, our strategy has failed. He went to China, to the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, and he kissed the ring of Putin, and he made friendship with China, and he has basically kept the taps open for the Russian oil, and he is now one of the biggest buyer of Russian energy ever in the world. Yeah. And while we were all hoping that India will join the free world, India has in reality joined the occupied world and the tyranny. And so I decided to change the strategy and call for the dismantlement of Russia. I do that since 3.5 years and the start of the war, and also for China. I was waiting until the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, but India has chosen the wrong side of the world, and now you will face the consequences. I promised that to Modi on Twitter, and I have done it exactly now to call for the dismantlement of India. And it's absolutely fair for the people of India, because the prosperity system which India is today is very low. You were rightly pointing out that India is still a very poor country, and it's a very underdeveloped country. And why? Because you have inherited this imperial structure of the British, and you're suppressing a lot of people. And there are a lot of legitimate independence movements in India, like, for example, the Khalistan movement. And we can support them. And it's very, very good. So you will be 20 or 25 new states, and then you can form a nice federation together like the European Union, and it will be much better for the people of India. And if you do it according to European concepts, we can avoid also kind of bloodshed and your kind of mismanagement, and you will have more countries instead of India. And that's absolutely a better scenario than the present situation where you are basically a Russian proxy.
Well, you just now said that Ukraine should have freedom to join any alliance they want, but you don't give this freedom to India to join Shanghai. India should not join any alliance such a huge country. And the second thing, you said that Khalistan movement is an independence movement. You very well know that Khalistan movement is created by Pakistan. There is no movement on ground in India of Khalistan. There is a movement of Balochistan independence on ground, and millions of Baloch don't want to stay with Pakistan, but you don't talk about that. I think you are a little bit biased towards
into
democracy,
Western
Ukraine.
alliances.
because you said that Modi is going towards dictatorship. Well, there is an election process which never was objected by any quarter in the world, that Indian elections are not fair. So Modi comes through an election. He is a democratically elected leader, and you don't accept it. Why?
No, I accept that he is democratically elected. There's no problem for that. I just say that he made the wrong choice. He went to Russia. He went to China. It was nobody forcing him to do that. Yeah, he could have easily tried in the last 3.5 years to supply weapons to Ukraine, to support the free world, to stop, to join the sanction regime which we have now imposed against Russia. But he didn't. Yeah, and he has sent his foreign minister to Austria during the visit of Mr. Modi, because Modi came also to Vienna last June, yeah, after the
After
visit.
41 years.
And I remember very well the interview of the foreign minister of India. It was a complete outrage and the insult, yeah. He said basically that because of the imperial crimes of the West and the colonial exploitation of Russia, of the West, of India, by the West, he is now totally justified to pursue his national interest and work with Russia. I say no. Russia is a genocidal power, and they are like destroying Ukraine under our eyes. And we cannot accept, and we will not accept. And you will see the pain for India will just rise. Now the sanctions will hit you very hard. I will also fight very much against the free trade agreement between the EU and India, and we will punish you very hard, yeah, for your alliance with
But
Russia.
Gunther, I
Feel
think
the
you can
pain.
try
You will feel the pain.
all you
Then
want.
elect Mr. Modi as long as you want. You can stay united. I cannot change that anyhow. But I will do whatever I can in my power to give you as much pain as possible. And I will talk negatively about India as much as I can. And I will expose all your complicity, all your crimes, all your backstabbing of the West, yeah, claiming to be a democracy and a friend, and you are not. There will be no partnership agreement between Europe and India. There will be no free trade agreement with India. And there will be a lot of support for the independence movements inside India. You will have to pay for that
So,
because
Arif bhai, all of
Well,
this is a complete joke. I'll tell you why.
yeah,
Because
he
just
is
last,
exposing
uh,
himself, because
no, no,
you are
Arif,
exposing
let
yourself,
me just,
because you
let me
don't
just
believe
outline
in
this.
democratic rule. You don't believe in anything. You just want slaves. NATO wants that everyone is aligned to them, while it is not the case. India is much bigger than entire Europe, and India is powerful. Bhutan has joined free trade agreement with India. European Union is dying to have free trade agreement with India, and the world is trying to get aligned with India. And another thing, that you don't have problem with dictatorship in Saudi Arab. You don't have problem with dictatorship in Pakistan, where an army chief is ruling the country. But you have problem with the democracy of Venezuela. You have problem of democracy in India. I don't understand. You are not exposing anyone else, but you are exposing your dirty designs.
Can I just add to that and say that the fact that he's gone up to this extent and he's intellectually so bankrupt that he's calling for the FTAs between India and UK to be dismantled. Just last week the entire European Union Parliament was basically in India begging for the FTA to be signed by January so that when they are back in India, they can basically unveil that FTA. So, with the world changing order, with supply chains getting so restricted to China, the world is in dire straits at the moment, and they want to sort of ensure that they have multiple supply chains. And that is one reason why, India was being used as a counterbalance to China. That's a different matter that, Trump has a different sort of myopic design in place, which is basically to sort of address his own mercantile interests with Pakistan, with his crypto firms, with Gentry Beach having all sorts of shady deals in Pakistan, where, the Pakistani military establishment is willing to sell its natural resources to the highest bidder. And that is what Gentry Beach is basically doing. He's just lapping up everything that the Pakistani establishment is willing to sell. And that is what, I have a problem with individuals like Gunther sitting in the West and advocating for totalitarian regimes like Pakistan to basically carry on with their sort of, oppressive agendas. Whereas, a free flowing democracy like India, you want to call for its expulsion and dismantlement. I mean, it's preposterous to say the least. I mean, the fact that we are actually talking about it itself is extremely preposterous. He's at the end of the day, he's just a sole advocate. Nothing major. His own government doesn't recognize him. So I don't think we should really be taking, the ramblings of a madman very seriously. But to come back to the Khalistani argument, Arif bhai, you know, what is the Khalistani argument? There are a bunch of Sikhs in Canada and United Kingdom who are running a feral agenda against, the Indian high commissions, which are sovereign high commissions in those countries. So they actually, the sovereign countries are actually allowing feral agendas to be done against another host nation, another country's mission in those countries. So that's the kind of bankruptcy that we're talking about. In addition, what is the population of those Khalistani miscreants? It's not even 5% of the Sikh diaspora living in Canada and the UK. Majority of the Sikhs, and this is according to Colin Bloom's report, which was presented to the British Parliament, less than 5% of the Sikhs are the so-called Khalistani sympathizers. The rest of them continue with their work. They visit India every year. Their relatives travel from India into the UK and Canada. In India itself, the Khalistani word is completely, it's a figment of imagination now. Nobody even considers that to be a propaganda anymore. This is just a rambling from Canada, corners of Ottawa, and London, which people are getting to hear. At the end of the day, you have to see from a Pew Research perspective. Pew Research carried out a study of the Indian Sikhs. 93% of Indian Sikhs are very happy and content and proud of their Indian identity. The fact that the Indian armed forces itself is overrepresented with the Sikh population goes to demonstrate that they are willing to fight for India. Just last year, when there was a showdown between India and Canada, the Sikhs of Delhi had a massive bike rally outside the Canadian High Commission. So the Indian Sikhs don't buy into this Khalistani propaganda at all. They've long done away with this, and they've understood the kind of pain that it caused, because it actually pushed back the development and the education and the rise of the Punjabi youth back in the 80s, and they saw the rest of India rise as a consequence. So they understand those issues, which is why they will never be part of such seditious and mad sort of propaganda, separatist movements. And this separatist movement is not even all Sikhs. It's a tiny little portion of Jat Sikhs which want Khalistan, because they are supremacist in their nature. So, which is why I said, this man doesn't understand India, and for him to call for the dismantlement of India is very intellectually dishonest and bankrupt. And the fact that you and I are sitting and talking to him is probably just giving him more ammunition at this point.
Thanks a lot. I admire your intellectual capacities, and I'm really awed by your smartness. And I'm so happy that you insult me on this podcast regularly. But nevertheless, I can just repeat what my basic case is. I will give India and Modi a lot of pain, and you have deserved it, because you're the ally of a genocidal maniac. And it's 3.5 years what you're doing. 3.5 years, you're buying Russian oil, you're supporting Russia, you say, it's not so hard what he does against Ukraine. This is the most important question for the European continent since World War II. This is the most important question of the world now. And you have sided with the perpetrator of this crime. And therefore, because I treated you like small children, like adolescents. You have to learn a little bit. You will see the light after time. You will educate yourself. Yeah. But what's so hard to understand of a genocide? What's so hard to understand that the people of Mariupol were destroyed by the Russian army and air force? Children were abducted, women were raped. What's so hard to understand? Do you have an intellectual problem of your capacity in India? Do you have no television in India? Do you have no internet in India? Are you somehow too small in your education level that you don't understand what genocide is? Do I have to tell it to you what Russia is doing to Ukraine? And you have decided to stand on the side of crime, and therefore you are a criminal as well, Mr. Modi. Remember this. You are a criminal by association. You have done this crime with Putin together because you have financially supported it. And therefore I am justified. Here, Gunther Fellinger-Jahn. And if I'm just a single individual, I will use my Twitter account to call for ex-India as long as you stand with Russia. And then I will find, and you can say that Khalistan is a small movement, but I will make it bigger. And I will find other independence movements in India. I will find other separatists who hate the dictatorship and the genocidal support of Mr. Modi towards Putin. And then you will have a problem. And I guarantee you, I will lobby with all my efforts against the partnership agreement with India, and you will see. We have a lot of people who don't like such trade agreements in the European Union, and you will see it will fail. And it's not me to blame, it's Mr.
Well,
Modi.
let me tell you one thing that you said 2 or 3 times, that you will continue giving us pen. We don't get pen from a maniac person who has a vested interest. Understand, you are an individual. Entire Europe is friendly with India, and they are not thinking like you are thinking. There are many maniacs. In your neighborhood, there was a maniac person, Hitler, Adolf Hitler. So you are of a similar person. What you are talking is fascism, because I have been with United Nations since last 31 years. I know what fascism is, and what you are preaching is fascism, and you have Western interest, because until now you have not spoken a single word about Pakistan, which is a global hub of terrorism. You are not, because maybe it is your Western interests are attached to Pakistan's terrorist organization ISI. So you are a supporter of global terrorist country, and that's why I think that we should not be worried with a person like you. I was thinking that you might be a wise person and you will be ready to discuss, but you are using very ugly words for world's largest democracy. So I think that it's very difficult. Adit, what you want?
So I just wanted to add, his hypocritical stance on India supporting or India buying Russian oil, which is basically allowing Russia to basically weaponize itself and go against Ukraine, it's a very fiducious sort of an argument. But at the end of the day, the European Union itself is buying so much of gas and oil from Russia. You just look at the trading figures. I mean, United States itself is buying 2 billion worth of commodities from Russia. So are they all, should they not all be held liable for basically fueling the war against Ukraine? So that is one argument. That is number one. Number two is, he has a problem with the word genocide, that, this is Putin's genocide of the Ukrainians. I agree what Putin is doing is fundamentally wrong and he should be stopped. But you also have to realize that in this day and age of multipolarity, you know, a nation's interest is paramount. Our interests are going to be permanent, our friends are not permanent. And that is what he doesn't realize, which is why, he's so blind spotted with the kind of genocide that the United States has conducted all over the world. I mean, you look at the various events across the world, right from Iraq to Vietnam to all of these places in the world, in the shape of NATO. What the NATO alliance was doing in Afghanistan, was that not genocide? when they were bombing children and killing, young children. There are still photographic images available of those times when, bombs were basically getting, young bodies in a brutal way. So the fact that you're so blind spotted by one genocide and not the other basically points to your hypocrisy. I mean, Pakistan for now is conducting probably the most heinous kind of genocide ever possible. That's something that your television, your internet doesn't seem to capture. You should read about Balochistan, and you should read about the kind of genocide that the Pakistani military establishment is carrying out in Balochistan, and how long the Baloch freedom movement has been going on for. So, all of this talk about genocide is purely a Western lens phenomenon, where you want to focus on the genocide of one, but you want to ignore on the other because, it suits your narrative at the end of the day. So this selective piggybacking is not going to last for very long because, people are very clever these days. They call out hypocrisy very nicely because, we're not living in the black day and age anymore. Information is much more freely available. All you've got to do is, search a little, and I'm sure you will get to hear. I mean, right from Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan to Philippines, the kind of atrocities that the United States has carried out all across the years, right from 1955 onwards, that shows that, this is, you're basically supporting a genocidal regime against another genocidal regime. So either have the gall to call out both, say that yes, NATO has also indulged in genocides, which I highly condemn, and that should, they should be held to higher accountability standards, which they are not, which you will not. So that hypocrisy is widely exposed as a consequence of the ramblings of the Temu version of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, you are really very much liking to hear yourself talking, and you are really the mastermind of the propaganda of Putin, and you are really this kind of typical Indian anti-imperialist, kind of anti-colonial Soviet kind of style, address the Americans and attack the Americans for everything they have ever done. And, I understand that. We have a lot of left-wing agitators in Europe as well, and I know all these arguments. Thanks a lot for sharing them again. Of course, we liberated Afghanistan. Of course, we liberated Iraq. Yeah? Of course, it was justified to do both interventions. And now there is 46 million people living in Iraq, and Iraq is a free country. And it worked much better than ever before under Saddam Hussein, who probably you liked very much, who killed these people with poison gas and with chemical attacks and all these other brutal crimes he committed for decades, because he was a great socialist, which you probably are as well. So thank you very much for your insights in the history.
What about Guatemala? What about Guatemala?
Pakistan. The more I think and I learn about India and your hypocrisy, which you have in India, this kind of thinking that you understand the world very well. Okay, Pakistan is a global partner of NATO. I will now support Pakistan much more. I have not a lot of sympathy for Pakistan up to now, and I really didn't care so much for them. But you have really provoked me into calling for a free trade agreement with Pakistan and for intensified partnership with Pakistan. And we will build a big military base of America in Pakistan, hopefully soon. And we will support Pakistan against India, very much so, because you are
Who
Russian.
are you? But you said I will support you. Who are you? What is your position? You are just an individual.
Thank you very much. Shift me to Pakistan.
No,
See,
but who are you? You
the
said
problem
I
is,
support Pakistan. You are just a maniac individual, nothing else. You are thinking that you are something, but you are nothing. Even your Austrian government does not own you.
Yes, I know that in a Soviet socialist context, you think, Arif, that the government owns you. Yeah, I know that this is a socialist thinking. The government must own you. I'm just a free individual. I tweet my opinions on Twitter, and I will give India a lot of pain because you well deserved it. You have chosen the enemy camp. You are now the enemy of the West. And we in
what
Europe
do you mean by enemy of the West, Gunther?
not conclude a partnership agreement with you. We will
You,
block you in the OECD agreement, and we will not allow you to enter.
No, but
We
who is the
you do
we?
not represent
Gunther,
West.
we will
You do not
sanction you very
represent
hard,
West.
and we will also make as much limitations to Indian immigration into the European Union, and we will also limit our high-tech support towards India, and you will see that this
But
line
you
will
are no
prevail.
one. You are no one. We will not do this. We will not do this. You are no one.
Yeah,
You are just
like I
in the
said,
corner of your room. You are just speaking, but you don't have any position. So don't exaggerate things. And I think that it is useless, Adit, to talk to this maniac person. And
no,
I think we
I
should
don't
end
think it's
here.
I think it's good to expose the Temu version of Adolf Hitler, because that is what he is basically exposing himself to be. Someone who doesn't recognize that the Americans went into Guantanamo and killed 200,000 people. They went into Iraq and killed 600,000 people. They went into Vietnam and killed 2 million people. They went into Philippines and killed 200,000 people, and doesn't recognize the sort of genocide that United States has carried out with the aboriginals within United States, and then has the gall to call out the sort of atrocities of Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, which we accrue to, which we understand
You
and we
are a
acknowledge,
friend of
and
Vladimir
we
Putin. You have made it very clear now. You are not a polite person of the world. Yeah, you are really a genocidal maniac supporter, and
says
this is
somebody else
you
who
are.
who's actually
Really, you are
who's
going to
hypocritical of
celebrate
genocides.
Independence Day again, and really,
I
you
mean,
call me Adolf Hitler. You have lost all credibility in India. You
no,
know
I mean,
nothing
I
about
mean the
Europe.
fact
You
the
know
fact that
nothing about
you the
European history.
fact
You are a disgrace in all
the
questions.
fact that you do
Because
not
you
want to
lack
listen to
basic
any other
access
opinion at
to
this
knowledge
point
and
demonstrates what kind of intolerance you basically harbor at this you're essentially a very intolerant man, because you don't want to hear other people's opinions of you. The fact is that you
I
actually
listened for
are not
45 minutes to you,
representative of any
insulting me
institution.
permanently, Adit.
You are just an individual at this point. You do not represent any government. You do not represent even an institution or an organization. Your whole, NATO enlargement group is just an activist group at the end of the day, that even your own government doesn't recognize and thinks, it's a rambling of a madman, because, Austria would rather have its, non-NATO credentials and appear to be, in that sort of a Swiss kind of a non-aligned kind of a scenario, and you want them to basically be pushed into some sort of a unipolar alliance. So your own government doesn't recognize you. In fact, your opposition parties also don't recognize you. That's the kind of individual that we are talking about. You're not representative of any organization. You're just a madman, just a Temu version of Adolf Hitler, who's a genocidal maniac, wants to conduct a genocide in India as a consequence of, calling for its dismantlement, where you want to exacerbate, sort of regional disbalances, and you want to cause harm to the world. That is who you are, Gunther. That's the kind of expose that we wanted to carry out, and I think we've been fairly successful in ensuring that you've been widely exposed as a consequence.
Thanks a lot for exposing me. I totally reject that I have anything to do with National Socialism. I'm actually a conservative Christian Democrat. I'm a transatlantic activist, and I absolutely say it very clear. The only fascist in the room is Mr. Modi, is Mr. Putin, and these are the fascists of today, and they are abusing their power to create dictatorial regimes. And now I was focused only on Russia, but I'm now very happy in the case of this campaign that I can focus also very much on ex-India, because it's the liberation of many of the suppressed nations inside India. And there is a lot of people who live in poverty due to this extremely bad management of India under the mismanagement, misrule, and tyranny of Mr. Modi. And I hope for his fall. And I hope that there will be changes in India. And Khalistan is just the first of
300,
many of the.
300 million people were brought out of poverty line in Modi's regime.
He doesn't know that.
300 million. And you say that Modi's policies are making people poor. I think you have a bias, and I think you have vested interest. It is not that a
Yeah,
maniac person is
obviously.
speaking, it is some vested interest which are served. Your vested interests are served, and you are hired, maybe you are hired to run a campaign, but you are just not a important person. As Adit said, that you don't represent any government, not any organization. You have few thousand Twitter followers and you have started thinking that you are a big leader. You cannot even win a seat in Austrian parliament.
I think you should take that up as a challenge, Gunther, and go and fight elections in Austria to see if you can actually, you know, you have some credibility for people to start taking you more seriously. Because at this point, you know nothing more than a joke. You don't represent any institutions. You're not backed by any organization that that the world or people can start taking you seriously. I mean, your 80,000 odd followers on Twitter, I don't think do the magic for you. I mean, you can do all you want, but if Narendra Modi starts coming down hard at you, I think you will be wishing that you hadn't taken such a battle. But he's a much more serious character, and I'm pretty sure that he will whiz you away like a little joke, a Temu version of Adolf Hitler, basically.
Anyway, guys, I think we will wind up it here because we cannot change people's minds who have some vested interest. And he calls himself a liberal democrat or Christian democrat, but he does not believe in democracy. He believes in stratocracy like in Pakistan. So we cannot change his mind. And I will never support Saddam Hussein. I did not say that I support Saddam Hussein. I was comparing the democracy in Saddam Hussein and in Pakistan. What is the difference? Saddam Hussein killed millions of Iraqis with poisonous gas. Pakistan killed millions in East Pakistan, Bangladesh, and now killing hundreds of thousands in Balochistan, KP, Sindh, everywhere. So I don't support Saddam Hussein. Let it be clear. But I don't support NATO or America's invasion in Vietnam. I don't support NATO's invasion in Syria. And you said that we brought Afghanistan out
Actually,
of communism, but you put Afghanistan in Sharia law. So a liberal democrat like you is supporting Afghanistan Sharia law. So I
no.
think we are talking to a maniac person. Any last
To a
word?
very
Actually,
uneducated person,
Actually, we didn't
uneducatedly maniac.
invade Vietnam. We defended South Vietnam. You don't know even the history of Asia.
Oh
You
my
have no
God. I
idea,
can't believe
really.
I can't
And
believe
we
that I'm
have
going to be hearing
liberated
this.
the only mistake is that we didn't
Chemical
defeat it
weapons were
in our
used
effort.
against civilian population. Please get your facts right. The least you can do
Vietnam
is
was
do
a
your
just
homework and
for the
come.
freedom of South Vietnam. And then the people
Please,
of
please go and
Vietnam,
do
they have
some
fled
research.
after the communists
Chemical
took over.
weapons. Chemical weapons were used against civilian population, killing 2 million people in Vietnam. That's the kind of genocide that you're basically
It
defending.
was
So
the
you're
fighting
defending the
freedom of the
absolutely
South Vietnamese.
indefensible at this point.
Have you really no idea of the history of Vietnam?
You clearly have no idea of the
How
atrocities
can
we,
you
that
talk?
the
we
Americans
really
I
carried
don't
out.
know
educated,
the history that
Oxford
you are
kind of
trying to
style
speak.
of knowledge, pretentious, and then you have no idea of the history of your
Oh,
own
yes. We
neighbors.
do not know whatever history you are preaching because you are a biased person. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. And I will put this interview as it is so that people should know who is right and who is wrong.
But please invite me again. I can outline more the 20 new states of ex-India because we didn't go into the
I
details.
th
How many
I think
countries
we've
can
had
we
enough of
name?
Madman's ramblings for one. I don't think we need to entertain the Temu version of Adolf Hitler any longer.
Exactly.
Because the people
Exactly.
have to know that India must be exed.
Thank you, Arif.
Maybe you will see the results very soon. You will see the world needs India. Your European Union
No,
is running behind. Ursula was before 2 weeks in India begging for a free trade agreement. Trump wants that India has trade agreement with, but Modi is not picking up phone.
I will
So,
stop that
so
agreement and you will get 100% tariffs on India soon.
We will see.
We will
I think
see.
just
we will
just
both be
try one
alive.
thing. Get acknowledgement from one member of Austrian Parliament for your mindset. Anyway, thank you very much, guys, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Arif.